Leading off our discussion tonight, our Democratic Congressman Jamie Raskin of Maryland. He's a member of the House Oversight Committee and the House Judiciary Committee. He attended part of Tim Morrison's deposition today. Also joining us, Tess Bridgman, former Special Assistant to the President, Deputy Legal Advisor to the National Security Council, and an Associate White House Counsel in the Obama administration. And Ron Klain, former Senior Aide to Vice President Joe Biden and President Obama, and a former Chief Counsel to the Senate Judiciary Committee. Ron Klain is an advisor now on Joe Biden's presidential campaign. Congressman Raskin, let me start with you. The president in this interview tonight with the Washington Examiner is calling Tim Morrison's testimony fantastic. He doesn't seem to understand that Tim Morrison has basically corroborated the worst evidence against the president, which, of course, is what he said to the president of Ukraine in that phone call.
Right. Look, he was called today as a fact witness. And, you know, I can't go into the details of what I saw, but if everything that you're quoting is true, then he indeed was a corroborating fact witness in this case. He was not called for his legal opinions about anything, and he's not even a lawyer. So what he thought about the president's conduct is neither here nor there from a legal or a constitutional perspective, but what he was able to verify from a factual perspective is definitely very important to us. And the critical point here is we've now had around a dozen witnesses, all of whom are telling us the same story. The president staged a shakedown operation against the Ukrainian government in order to obtain this political information that he wanted about the Bidens and Burisma, and in order to verify a false story about the 2016 campaign, essentially replacing what we know about the systematic and sweeping effort by Russia to subvert our campaign with a false story about Ukraine. Everything's lined up there. So ultimately, I believe we're going to find that the Republicans are going to make an argument that we're starting to hear now, which is not that none of this happened. They're going to quietly concede that. They're just going to say it doesn't quite rise to the level of an impeachable offense. And I think that's going to be their last-ditch argument.
What can you tell us, Congressman, about what it was like today to be on the House floor for the kind of vote that no member of Congress ever expects to cast?
Well, it was somber, and a lot of my colleagues who oftentimes speak with a lot of rhetorical flourish or humor were very subdued, and I spoke also, and I found myself in a very solemn and serious mode. We are acting, in a certain sense, vindicating the values of the founders of the Constitution, looking backwards, but also looking forwards. We're acting in the service of future generations. So it was a pretty heavy thing, I got to tell you. At the same time, I think it felt honorable that we were standing strong for our Constitution. We were disappointed that the Republicans decided to, lock arms and say they didn't want to be part of an investigation when we were giving them precisely what they've been asking for the last several weeks, which is open hearings and the ability for the committee to release the depositions and so on. And it's obvious that they haven't figured out what to say about the fact that the basic gravamen of the complaint seems to be proven more and more every single day. So instead, they rail about the process. And I think that that act is beginning to wear on people. It looks pretty thin. And, there are a couple of times over the last week or two where they've turned the People's House into Animal House with their various antics and provocations. And I don't think it's a very good look for our colleagues across the aisle.
Tess Bridgman, your old job in the White House is right in the center of the drama on the day the president has this phone call with the president of Ukraine, because immediately afterwards, that's apparently where everyone is running over to the National Security Council, the lawyer's office, and the deputy, you being the deputy, and the deputies present in these scenes. Colonel Vindman goes over there. We hear Morrison goes over there. I don't know if they're bumping into each other as they're going in and out of that room. But what do you make about Morrison's account today of rushing over to the counsel's office? What I found out about it is the reasons he then says he was concerned about the phone call have nothing to do with the counsel's office.
That's right, Lawrence. There is something that's quite odd about his account of why he went to speak with the NSC legal advisor and his deputy. He mentions being concerned about leaks, being concerned about partisanship, being concerned about Ukraine policy more broadly. These are the kinds of things that you might go to the communications office for, that you might go and talk with the executive secretariat if you're concerned about where the document is being handled within the White House complex. I think what's very telling is that everyone else who's provided an account of rushing into that office has said they did so because they were deeply concerned about what they saw as grave misconduct. They knew that it is wrong for the president to use his office to try to shake down a foreign leader to do political favors for him. And they were deeply invested in carrying out the bipartisan Ukraine policy that is, core to why there is such a high national security cost to the president's personal aggrandizement here. They knew that this was standing in the way of U.S. support for Ukraine being able to defend itself against Russia, for the core principle that you don't take borders by force. So I think Morrison's account that he went to the counsel's office for these other peripheral reasons that don't sound in misconduct or illegality really don't ring true, or there's something more to what he was expecting the legal office to do with that information.
Ron Klain, it reads to me like Tim Morrison is trying to preserve his life in Republican employment in Washington after this, and it worked. He's got Donald Trump tonight saying that his testimony was fantastic because he put in some sentences there that to Donald Trump sound positive. But in the substance, it is all equally condemning as Colonel Vindman's was. Even the point of saying that the rough transcript that the White House put out of the phone call is accurate in substance. Accurate in substance means there could be missing pieces of it, but in substance, it is accurate. And so there's actually no contradictions here that we can find in the public testimony so far between Tim Morrison and Colonel Vindman.
That's right, Lawrence. I mean, it's stunning, as Congressman Raskin alluded to earlier, that you've had all these witnesses come before the Intelligence Committee, and essentially 8 to 12 of them basically confirm the same story. That's more than the number of trick-or-treaters I had at my house tonight. You know, it's a stunning lineup of witnesses all confirming the same story. And look, and as to Mr. Morrison's statement today that he wasn't concerned about illegality, I think that's part your explanation that he wanted to preserve his viability in Washington, but also part him trying to avoid pleading guilty to a crime. If he had known, if he believed it was illegal, the effort to hide this document would be an act of obstruction of justice. And I don't think Mr. Morrison was prepared to plead guilty to obstruction today in the House Intelligence Committee. So he told the truth. He told that basically the story everyone's told so far is true. The story that the transcript confirms is true. Donald Trump shook down a foreign government for political assistance. He betrayed his oath of office. He betrayed our national security interests. And the evidence on that is just overwhelming now.
Congressman Jamie Raskin, Tess Bridgman, Ron Klain, thank you all for starting off our discussion.